Hey, this is Alex from the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. To see more videos like this from the Good Old Boys, hit subscribe and support this independent podcast.
Zamir White, guy that we had high hopes for coming into this season because he was going to be behind Josh Jacobs. Do you see Zamir White getting more of a run this year, or is it going to solely be the Josh Jacobs train again?
I think slightly, and mainly because he's had a chance to digest an NFL system, right? Like you had Jacobs absolutely balling out. They did bring him in for a reason. At this point, he is not Josh Jacobs, right? Like he's not going to be able to go in and carry the ball 300 times. But, maybe you do see him sneak in there with 110 carries, something like that. And I think that might be part of the reason where Jacobs' numbers, like I said, drop a little bit from 340, maybe 325, 320, something in that nature. But a lot of it's protection, right? Like, is he going to be able to help keep Jimmy G upright? Is he going to be able to do more than 3 yards in a cloud of dust? He was a big yak guy at Georgia, right? He'd hit that initial contact, plow through, fall forward, and you'd end up with 6-7 yards a clip. It's a little bit harder to do that in the NFL. Now his stature leads to that. He does play with a good pad level. And they got to see what they have, right? Because if they're not going to keep Jacobs and they're not going to see him as part of the solution long term because they don't want to pay big money to a running back, well, then here's your heir apparent. So at some point you have to give him enough run to give a viable game assessment on if this guy can be your back going forward, or if you're going to jump back into the draft next season and bring in a running back that way.
So here's the only thing that concerns me about Zamir White, is looking at their depth chart as we record this. It's the two guys behind Zamir White that are on the depth chart, and that is two veteran role player running backs with Amir Abdullah and Brandon Bolden, like guys that have established themselves as veteran backs in this league that have been around. So how long is the leash, right? How long is the leash on Zamir White? Do they do that where they try to give him the run and try to see, is this guy the future? But if he fumbles, not literally, but if he fumbles the ball, right, how quick do those other, serviceable veterans, how quick do those guys come in and supplant him? Because those are known commodities, right? You know what you get with Amir Abdullah. The guy's been around. You know what you get with a Brandon Bolden. So, what is the strategy there with Zamir White? That's I don't know that even, if you go handcuff on Josh Jacobs, right? Like if you get Zamir White as a handcuff, is that truly the handcuff to him?
I wouldn't be concerned about either one of those guys. And reason being, right, they have a completely different skill set on what Zamir White does versus what Amir Abdullah does versus what Brandon Bolden does. Abdullah, more of a special teams kind of guy, change of pace, pass catching type of guy. Same thing with Bolden, right? Like Bolden, even when he was in New England with Josh McDaniels, was more of a third down pass catching type of guy. If Jacobs goes down, I think that Zamir White is firmly planted in there on first and second down type of work. If you're sitting there last pick of the draft, you don't even necessarily need to spend that draft capital there. Zamir White will likely still be undrafted this season, even by all of the Josh Jacob managers when the season begins. So something worth keeping an eye on, and a guy that, if you've got Jacobs on your roster and he goes down, yep, this is a spend the fab to put this guy on there.